What's up, everyone? Welcome to 2 Decades Deep podcast. This is a podcast about navigating your 20s, the ups and downs, the rounds and rounds of your 20s. We talk about it here. This is also season 3 of the podcast. Brr, 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 brr. Cue the horns. I cannot believe that we are in season 3. It has been amazing. We started this podcast. It was just me and my girl Karina, just two of us thugging it out in the trenches together. And now we have a huge team. We have collegiate ambassadors at the NCAT and the Howard colleges. It's been amazing just to see the growth, not only within the team, but then the growth of who I have evolved as a person. I thought, what would be a perfect way to introduce season 3 with me turning 28? By the time this episode rolls, I will be 28. I turn 28 on November 22nd, which is crazy. And I thought that it would just be a good way to just show the realities of what it looks like to be in my late 20s. But I want to note that just because I'm 28, I'm still cool. I'm still young and turnt. I know all the lingo, like Sigma. I learned this the other day. Up top, down low, up in heaven, 6, 7. So I still know the new lingo, so not too much on me being in my late 20s. But I think it's just really important to just talk about what it really means to be in your late 20s, the feelings that come with that. And then I also want to share some of the lessons that I learned in my early and mid 20s. So sit down, stay a while. I'll just share like around 8 to 9 lessons that I've learned and things that I'm still learning. I haven't conquered any of these by no means, and I'm still figuring out a lot. And how I feel now may not be how I feel when I'm 29. It may not be how I feel when like 6-8 months from now, but I think it's just important to always talk about where I am and how I feel in this exact moment. And so whether you're tuning in on Spotify or YouTube, or you're checking it out on Apple Podcasts, we are so happy that you're here. All right, let's dive in. So a new segment that I'm introducing in my solo episodes are a thought that has been sitting with me. So anything that I've been thinking about lately, whether it's a cultural event, whether it's an article that I read, or it's just something that has just come up in natural everyday life. And then I will share a journal entry that I've done that kind of ties to that topic. So something that has been sitting with me recently is this concept of running out of time. And I feel like, and I've thought this when I was in my early 20s, even before my early 20s, of what it means to run out of time and when things or how things should be at a certain time in your life. So, like I said, for the 15th time, I'm turning 28 years old, and I keep getting these phrases of, you're almost 30, or when are you having kids, or have you found a partner yet? You're almost 30. And it's almost as if turning 30 is a death sentence for youth, or turning 30 is just a death sentence, period. And, you know, I feel like there has been this societal pressure to have things figured out by the time you go 3 decades in. And sometimes I feel it's almost like a hand-me-down logic of what worked in the past has to be applicable to today's time, or almost as if what they experienced or what other people have experienced has to be projected onto you. And so kind of with that being said about this running out of time and something that I'm still wrestling with, I made this journal entry. And this was about a couple months ago. A thought that's been sitting with me lately is how somewhere in your late 20s, the clock just gets louder. It's not even about age, really. It's more like this quiet, constant hum in the background. You start noticing how everyone around you seems to be arriving somewhere. Career milestones, engagements, babies, home ownership. And even if you're happy for them, which I am, there's that little voice that whispers, wait, should I be there too? It's strange because you're still young and you feel young, but the world starts treating you like you should have these things figured out by now. And that's where the pressure does creep in. You start measuring your worth by timelines, not by growth. I've caught myself doing this so many times, scrolling, comparing, and overanalyzing, thinking that if I don't make something happen by a certain age, I've missed my shot. But lately, I've been trying to remind myself that I'm not running out of time. I'm just learning to trust the pace of life. Because when you really zoom out, your late 20s aren't an ending. They're a transition, a bridge between who you thought you'd be and who you actually are becoming, and in that in-between space. And so that's where these lessons live today. So I want to slow things down and really just share some of the lessons that I've learned. And like I said, not because I have it all figured out, but because I'm still figuring it out, and I think it's important to share that. So the first one, growth isn't always loud. I thought that growth always had to be visible, right? Like the new job, the new career, just like the big tangible things. But sometimes growth looks like the smaller things. Let me give you an example. So I started the podcast in 2025, 2024. The years they're blending. And I just have a very anxious personality when things don't work out the way I thought they were. I mean, I have a control issue, but that's something I'm currently working out in therapy. But I digress. And I remember when I started the podcast, I wanted everything to look, sound, and be a certain way. And so when things would go wrong, whether it was a simple thing such as maybe the upload was taking too long, or it could be as big as the audio was off, I would freak out. Today, as I'm currently filming this episode, this was not intended, y'all, to be a solo episode. It was supposed to have a guest, and she is sick and she will be on at a later time. But honestly, I kind of chuckled to myself and I was like, you know what, this is the name in the game of being in production. And I adapted. I got to DC a little early. I decided to kind of freeball it. I have general notes on this laptop, but I'm doing this as I go. And that is growth that is a little bit invisible. Sure, you don't see the big accolades that come with everything that I do, but I learned like, wow, I really am becoming more adaptable in real time. And so that's just an example of what it looks like, that growth isn't always loud. And just because growth isn't for show all the time, it's for you, and that's all that matters. The second lesson I learned is to take risks in my 20s. And I just want to emphasize, I don't think you can't take growth later in life, but I think you have such a great opportunity in your 20s to kind of do whatever. This is for most 20-somethings, I do recognize that people have responsibilities a little earlier in life. But for me, I would say this is the least amount of responsibility that I probably will ever have. I don't have children. I'm living with my parents, which means that I'm saving money. I can take risks right now as a 28-year-old, but I took risks in my early 20s. I studied abroad. I moved across the country to DC with no job, no backup plan, and things that may to some people seem very unserious and ridiculous. And you do have to kind of look at what potential risks can come with. But I think with great risk can come great reward. And I like to live a life of no regrets. And so I decided to move across the country at that time because I did recognize that I wanted to find myself. I felt very sheltered. I felt very limited at the time in the Chicagoland area. And so I thought, I have family here. I have the opportunity to create a life for myself. And it wasn't easy. I was broke. I was working 2 jobs. I was figuring myself out. I had a post heartbreak. There was a lot of transitional things that were still going on when I moved here, but I thought that I owed it to myself to give myself an opportunity to experience something different. And even though I'm back in Chicago, I look back at my time in DC and I am so happy that I did it, because if it wasn't for me getting my arse kicked in DC, I wouldn't have started this podcast. I wouldn't have met lifelong friends in DC. I wouldn't have realized how important it was for me to love on myself. I learned that I had patterns that I wanted to break. And going back to growth isn't always out loud. There's a lot of healing and a lot of things that I had to do on my own. And I'm really grateful for the risks. And you always find your way to where you're supposed to be. And so while that season has ended in my life, and we're going to go back to what it looks like to end seasons a little later in the conversation, but I'm really glad that I took this risk, and it builds confidence. And so now I know that if I took this risk of moving to one of the most expensive cities in America without a job, I can take other risks as well. All right, lesson 3, taking care of your body. Now, some things are inevitable. Some diseases that may attack your body, unfortunately, aren't always, you can't always control what happens to yourself, but just more and more, I'm realizing how important it is for me to take care of myself. Diabetes runs in my family, and I just really want to make sure I'm doing everything that I can to protect myself. And so it looks like eating healthier. It looks like being more active. I really do try to work out as much as I can. I mean, I would be lying if I didn't admit that some of the things were vain. You know, I want my body to be T. But I also realized that, no, I want to feel good when I'm walking up a flight of steps. I want to be able to run. I want to be able to one day spend time with my little ones and my kids. And I want to be able to help people and show up for people in a physical sense. And so that all comes with how I'm treating my body now. And I've noticed that weight sticks a little more in your later 20s, and our bodies are always shifting. And I want to be able to stay on top of that, because I know that later in life that it gets harder and harder. And so if I can do all that I can now, I know that I'm putting myself in a great position later. Also, with physical health, I think that I would be remiss to not acknowledge that your physical health matters just as much as your mental health. And I have been very transparent, and I'm very transparent about this, that I do struggle with my mental health. That's something that I've struggled with since I was younger. And now more than ever, I realize how important it is for me to take care of myself, because stress does affect you physically. I'm learning that more and more about how important it is for me to cope well. So journal, I go to therapy, I do those things that I talk to people. I used to be a person who didn't like to always show my vulnerabilities. I didn't always like to go to people when I needed help, because I wanted to be the one that had it all together, right? But I realized it's just not a healthy way to live my life. And it's not helpful in general to come unauthentically. And if you are going through things, there are people who love you and are here for you. And so I think that I have learned just as important it is to prioritize your physical health, it's also important to acknowledge how important your mental health is as well. They coexist. They both equally matter, in my opinion. And so I'm realizing how important it is to take care of my body. Kind of going on with what I said about I didn't like to be vulnerable, or I didn't always like to go to people. My next lesson is community is a lifeline, not a luxury. And I do want to read this verbatim, because I think this is so important and so crucial about how to do community. I put friendships start to thin out in your 20s, and you crave people who you see beyond your resume or your followers. And I've learned that community isn't something you stumble into. It's something that you nurture. So you have to reach out. You have to check in. You have to show up even when it's inconvenient. The right people make this chapter in your life lighter. You have to find them, and you have to keep them. And I'm really talking about healthy relationships, right? When I keep going back to when I'm in DC, because that was just such a crucial season for me. But even as recently as a couple months ago, I found myself just being in a very weird space. That's the best way I can describe it. I think a lot of it was me getting older, and my life is not looking the way I want it to look. And I'll give you a little bit insight. I shared in season 2 how I had to move back home with my parents to reset, because financially, I just, unfortunately, But also, fortunately, because I think it was time for me to move on, I wasn't able to keep myself financially afloat. And if I did choose to stay in a, what is it called? An apartment. That's how long it's been since I've lived by myself. Um, I was in an apartment and I wasn't able to financially afford it. I could have stuck that out, but I wouldn't have been able to afford anything else. And so me moving back home, I'm still home. I am saving a little money. I am saving money, but it's not the way I thought I would be. I thought I would have had moved out by now. I also thought at this stage as a 28-year-old, I would have been married, or my career would have blown up and took off. And so I kind of got into a moment where I was just very sad, if I'm being honest. I also felt like, I just talked about my mental health. I feel like that wasn't in the best position, and just other family stuff that was going on. And I just kind of quite literally crashed out. And then I was very burned out. And in the past, I would have just dealt with it myself and bottled it up. But that was the time where I really realized how much I need my community. And so I reached out to my friends. One woman, shout out to Tamara, she sent me orchids. And then another one offered to go to happy hour with me. And then other people just prayed over me and just told me that I wasn't alone. Those are the things that I realized how much I need them as a lifeline, and how important it is for me also to return the favor. Sometimes it doesn't look convenient. I'm also in a sorority. And one thing I've learned about being in a sorority is that we are not always going to be on the same playing field. What I mean by that is some people currently are about to get married. Some people have just lost their parents or a best friend. Some people just got a new job or a promotion. Some people might be furloughed or laid off. We're all in different stages in our lives. And if you have capacity for it, I realized how important it is for me to show up in every sense of the word, and how important it is to nurture those relationships, because we're only going to get busier. We're only going to have to wrestle and tackle on other things. And it's important to be there for people no matter what. Alrighty. The next lesson is relationships in your 20s hit different. I have always been a lover girl. I've always wanted to be in love, fall in love, even when I was younger. And I was one of those that would look at Disney princesses and be like, nope, I want that relationship. I would look at High School Musical or these other shows, and I would say, yep, I just can't wait for my black love or my love to come into my life. And I didn't get into my first relationship until I was 22. And that relationship lasted for about 2 years. And then, y'all, I went into a series of talking to different guys, and they were just ending really bad. And I remember reflecting on it and being like, oh, these guys, like, they're losers. Like, why are these guys who aren't good for me or lack emotional intelligence or don't know what they want to do with their lives, or they're all over the place? Like, it was so easy for me to blame the other person. And they weren't perfect, but I know I got to the point where I had to realize, like, relationships are a mirror. They're not there to fix me. They should be an addition to my life. And I realized maybe I'm in relation with other guys that maybe aren't emotionally intelligent because I'm not emotionally intelligent, or I'm not in tune with my emotions. Maybe I'm choosing guys that treat me bad because I also treat myself bad, and I don't invest in self-love, and I don't sit with myself and really acknowledge the things that I need to work on and how to heal. And so, yeah, I think that I felt like I had the capacity. I didn't realize that I had the capacity to be soft. I didn't realize that the mirror of the patterns, my triggers, etc., like, they all had to do with how I viewed myself. And one thing that I put in my journal that I will note now is love won't fix you, but the right kind of love will hold you accountable and cause you to be the best version of yourself. And that's something that I'm currently seeking now. I wish I could come on here on this great couch or seat, whatever you'd like to call it, and tell you, but now I found the healthiest, wonderful relationship. I have not. But one thing I have come to terms with is, what does relationship look like as a single woman, which I currently am. And I used to think that being single was this waiting period for my life to start. And I was on standby until I found the love of my life and my Prince Charming. And so I almost viewed life in my early and mid 20s as that, right? And then if I would go on a date, I'm like, that's my husband. I know it. Versus just existing and having fun on the date, I would do things, or I had this thought process, okay, maybe when I'm healed, when I do everything right, then I will be worthy of this great relationship. Only to realize maybe I just need to show up for myself when no one's watching. It has nothing to do necessarily with another person of how much I'm healing. Maybe the priority right now is myself. And also, I'm not promised a relationship just because I'm working on myself. And so I had to put myself in a position to really acknowledge, like, whether I get the relationship or not, I need to put myself first and really love and heal on myself. And going back to this running out of time, I wrote down, I used to think for a long time I was scared that being single in my late 20s meant that I was behind. Like everyone was finding their person while I was just out there figuring it out. But the truth is, I'm finding my person, but it just happens to be myself first. And when I'm still on the journey of self-love and trying to see what that looks like and how to love myself deeply, but not in a cliche way, but in a way that's really raw and authentic, and stop chasing connection out of fear, but attracting it from a sense of peace, I would be in a better position. And so, yeah, I'm still single, but not waiting, but I'm just preparing for what that season looks like. Kind of going off of that, I have another lesson and we're almost done, y'all, because I don't want to just preach to y'all, but you don't have to rush your becoming. What is becoming anyway? I think I used to look at becoming would be for a certain time period in my life. So when I graduated from college, I would become what? When I turn this age, I will become maybe whole, healed, and it has no timeline. And you're always becoming. I think that's why I was so wrecked by Michelle Obama's book, because in each season of your life, you are becoming something else. You're not tied down to one direction in your life. And so with that, though, every day can come with a new direction. You never know who you're going to experience. You never know what conversation will shift your life completely. You'll never know until you just sit and let life run its course. And I have a control issue. It is really hard for me to not know what is around the corner. Like I said earlier, as of this morning, I thought I was going to do a guest episode and I kind of had to pivot in real time. You just never know what life is going to bring at you for the good and the bad. So why rush something you have no idea how it's going to unfold? And being present, being prepared. I'm not saying just do life, just don't have any sense of direction or have a plan. But I think with being present and just being where your feet are, I mean, the Bible talks about being sufficient for the day because tomorrow has troubles of its own. No, that's the verse. I'm going to trust myself. And you just want to make sure that you really are living in the moment. And I think that has caused a lot of freedom in my life. And I'm just letting things be the way that they are right now. The third to last step is work hard to create the life you want. Don't wait till you're 30. I've also heard on the flip side of, the running out of time you have time. So let your 20s be fun, chaotic, etc. I think both things can coexist. I had a time and I'm having a time in my 20s. I've made stupid decisions. I've danced on rooftops. I've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 too many drinks before. I've made crazy decisions I've sorry, mom. I've drunk texted, drunk called guys. All the things, y'all. I'm telling you, I've experienced a lot of crazy stuff in my 20s. But I've also worked very, very hard. And I think that two things can be true at once. Enjoy your life, travel, be with your friends, spend money. Money comes back. But also work really hard, create and set up the life that you want in your 30s. Because, I mean, youth is a gift. And there's this quote that's like, the youth is wasted on the young, where sometimes we just kind of navigate life and go through life without any sense of direction. And it can put you at a deficit. And so I think it is important, like I said, and it doesn't always have to be career wise, right? It could just be prioritizing your therapy, or your mental health, prioritizing your physical health, things of that nature. You're setting yourself up so you can enjoy the latter half of your life. Save the money now. Put yourself in a position. I'm trying to stay home, even though sometimes it still feels a little daunting, or I'm 28, why am I still living at home? But I also try to look at it like, yeah, but I'm saving money. I'm putting myself in a position that when I am a little older, I'll be in a better financial position. And so working hard to create the life that you want in the future and keeping that top of mind is very important. Two more things. And the second to last one is being yourself. And so one thing that I'm working on and that I'm still trying to work on is being transparent about who I am. I like to say, a delicious life. I have a life that is fun. I'm able to be creative, whether it's working on this podcast or just doing other creative things. I have amazing friends. I have traveled. I was in Japan recently, and it was a solo trip, and I reflected on how amazing my life is and how fortunate I am. I also have acknowledged that I do get lonely. I do get anxious. There are things that about my personality, like I'm stubborn. I can be very quirky. I've been told I don't always have the best first impressions. Sometimes I can be really reserved and introverted. Sometimes I can be very crazy and wild and spontaneous. Sometimes you get the point. I can be the both and accepting all forms of me has not been easy, but I feel like in order to really walk into who I'm supposed to be and to really find this higher sense of self-love, I have to accept all versions of me. I can therapy myself to death. I can do all the things to try to be a better version of myself, but some things are just going to be, period. Like I'm never going to be perfect. I also don't have to try to be perfect, which is, I like to say I am a recovering perfectionist, because I used to think so much or care so much about what everyone else thought about me. And then I realized, how do I feel about myself? What are the things that I'm telling myself? I'm going to be misunderstood anyway. I think that you just have to realize that no matter how much work you put in yourself, sometimes you're just going to be, and that's okay. And you would rather be you than to be anyone else. And that's very cliche, like, love yours, live your life. Like, you only have your life, live it to the fullest. Don't try to be anybody else. But for real though, you'll never be anyone else. And so I try to live my life to be as fruitful, as intentional, as thoughtful as I can. And that doesn't mean that I don't compare. Like I just talked about how not even 2 months ago, I was down in the dumps looking at everybody else, feeling like everyone else has arrived and I haven't. But I just have to trust and believe that things really do work out, and the experiences that I have are for me. And I'm not a person that likes to live with regrets. And I think the only thing that I have regretted in my 20s that I haven't been more of myself early on. And I thought that in order to be worthy of things, it had to look a certain way and sound a certain way and be a certain way. And it's like, no, I'm worthy because I am. And oh my gosh, I was getting a little teary-eyed. But I'm worthy because I am. And the more I live authentically myself, the more fruitful my life will become. And for the good or the bad, I'm me. Lastly, letting go isn't giving up. So this one hit me recently, just about what does it look like to let go of things, especially good things, right? For example, DC, my life was good here. I had friends, I found a church home. I was discovering who I was called to be. My work friends were here. There were things that were amazing, but I also kind of kept coming back to this point of, when is it time to move on? I feel like I kind of hit my creative limit here. I felt like I could be in a better financial position if I moved back to Chicago. And it made me sad, because I think that's a part of a grief that a lot of people don't acknowledge, about when seasons are over and when things shift, and what it looks like to move on when you've outgrown something. And it doesn't always have to be this dramatic change. Moving back home, moving period, is inherently dramatic, and it's a lot. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't always have to be a bad thing. It could just be a moment where you realize, like, I'm evolving in a different way. And it's a hard truth, because especially when you realize, like, I talked about outgrowing like a space or a job. I think people recognize that. But what does it look like to outgrow people? I used to look at friendships as like, these are my forever people. And when people probably are going to be in your life forever, but you also don't know what that looks like. And then you kind of feel the pressure to keep everything together, especially when something once served you very well and now it's no longer serving you. And for me, moving on from relationships, and like romantic relationships, ending that when I realized, like, yeah, this isn't going to work out, even though there was one guy recently that I was dating and he was great, but I know that it wasn't going to last, and it kind of sucked. But I know that I have to move on, and I have to be with things that align with more of who I am, and that's okay. And so, and with friendships, and as you evolve in some relationships where you were once close to someone, now you're no longer. And sometimes people may see the distance, and that doesn't necessarily mean something went wrong, when really you're just learning how to move in a different direction. And that's the quiet heartbreaks that people kind of overlook, and realizing that you can love something deeply, but also love from a distance. And it's not failure. So whether you move on, you have to like move on from a career, when you move on from a job, when you move on from a relationship, friendship, or romantic, it's more of moving on to something that's more aligned with you. A quick story. I talked about this before. I've always wanted to be in journalism. I always wanted to be a news anchor. And my senior year of college, I've never shifted from wanting to be a journalist until my senior year of college. And it felt like I failed. It felt like I wasted time. I put myself in positions to make sure that once it was time for me to graduate, I would be in the best position to be the best anchor I can be. But then all of a sudden, I didn't want to do it anymore. And it felt like a loss. I grieved the life that I thought I wanted to have. But then I really tried to make sure that I allowed life to just redirect me. And I have a podcast now. I still get to interview people. I still get to storytell in a meaningful way. In my full-time job, I'm a content strategist for a marketing firm. But what comes with that is storytelling. And I interview companies, employees at companies, and it looks different. I never would have thought I would be in marketing. I never would have thought I would have had a podcast and shared more of my voice. But that doesn't mean that dream of being an anchor went to waste, but it just opened up a new opportunity. And so being open to that as well. The last lesson that I'm actually coming up with on the spot is how important it is for me to cling on to my faith. I grew up Christian, and growing up, I was in the church, y'all, down. Like, I was in church on Sundays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays. My godfather was the pastor of the church, and I did get church fatigue. I'm not going to lie. And I also felt like just in the stages of growing up and just kind of dealing with my mental health and just things not aligning perfectly with how I thought life should be. I mean, at one point, my mom and dad got really sick and had almost a near-death experience when I was younger. And I kind of was over my faith. I was over that season in my life. And so I kind of made a decision when I got to college. I was good on that church stuff. And I wouldn't say I left the faith, but I definitely deprioritized it in my life. But as I went through my freshman, sophomore, junior year of college, not really prioritizing church, I found that there was a huge hole missing in my life. Like I felt like there was an empty void, but I didn't know what to do with it. And there was a lingering voice of like, maybe I should go back to church. Maybe I should find my church community. Maybe I should tap into my faith. And by my senior year of college, I hit rock bottom with my mental health. And I felt like I was in a state where I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know what to do next with my life. And if I'm being transparent, I even questioned if my life was even worth living. And that's when I started to reconnect with my faith. And since then, it's been a very up and down journey. I've joined different churches in different seasons of my lives. I've learned different things at different churches. I've met so many amazing people. I've learned, though, that things, just because I have faith in a God that is good, life that won't always be good. And the one thing in the Christian faith is, we're not promised that things won't go wrong and that we won't suffer in this life, but we are promised that we have a God that will be with us every step of the way. And I'm still learning what my faith looks like. There's this term like reconstruction, deconstructing. I'm unlearning things that I had belief in when it comes to the Christian faith. And there's things that I'm relearning or learning about what it looks like to follow God and leaning into that uncertainty. And so that might be something that I talk a little bit more about, like my faith life later episodes. But that is essentially, I think, the biggest lesson that I've learned in my 20s of surrendering what I think I want and giving it to a God that knows all. And this is applicable to whatever faith that you all have. I think it's important to believe. It's beautiful to believe and to believe in something. And I hope that you all find, whether it's the Christian faith or whether it's in other things, I hope that you find what aligns with you. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode. When this episode drops, I'll be 28 and I am still figuring out who I am. I'm still rediscovering who I am, but that's the beauty in it. 30 is not a death sentence. And I know I keep talking about 30. It's like, girl, you still have 2 more years in the game. But the way people talk about your late 20s is almost as if like, yeah, you might as well be 30. And I can't wait actually to evolve and become like older. I think it's beautiful to age. And in this day and time, every day is beautiful to be a part of because life is crazy right now. I don't have to explain all that's going on, not only in the US, but globally as well. And so to wake up, to have breath in my lungs is a privilege. And I want to live my life in a way that's authentic, that helps me love and serve on people. And it's a way that I can look back and just appreciate all the things that have come with this. And so thank you all for tuning in. We have a phenomenal season ahead. You'll even be seeing more of me. I'm going to be doing more of these solo chats as well. So as always, we are uncovering who we are one chapter at a time, and we're unfolding at our own pace. And we're exactly where we need to be. Take care, everyone.